Hey, what is going on YouTube? Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And guys, we have a game in the Grosse Kurfürst for you guys. As most of you know, she was recently buffed in this most recent update. And well, waiting for the Lucian and Venezia here on update day, I decided to hop into her, and she did not disappoint. Both the Montana and the Kurfürst were buffed in this update. Long overdue, however, it is much appreciated, and the GK is now a viable option at Legendary tier. If you guys remember, the GK, the Yamato, and the Alaska were the three original Legendary tier ships introduced to World of Warships Legends, and at that time there was no Tier 8, so those ships were kind of rolled out going against Tier 7 ships, so of course they were going to seem overpowered. And even at the time, the Alaska going against two other Legendary tier battleships did suffer a little bit, which is why the Alaska has been buffed again, nerfed, buffed, and I think nerfed once again. So despite the Wargaming balancing department having no idea how to introduce ships into a game, I think we're finally getting to a spot where Legendary tier is somewhat balanced. Now, I make that statement with a huge asterisk because the teammates you get at Legendary tier, well, they're not too much different than the dumb teammates you get at every other tier. However, your mistakes are amplified tenfold at Legendary tier with the gun caliber increase, the rate of fire of certain cruisers, etc. So just something to keep in mind is you're going to get bad teammates, but there are certain teammates that have Legendary ships that definitely shouldn't have them. However, that's an argument that we can make as a Brisbane pulls out broadside to the sea flank here. We're turning our guns to get our first salvo of the game. We aim it a little bit high. We can overmatch pretty much every part of his bow. Decent dispersion and grouping, and what does a Brisbane player get? Is lucky. 2 shatters there on probably the belt on the side and 2 penetrations. Still a decent hit, and again, we are actually running a full secondary build, so kind of any main gun hits you can get at the beginning of the game are always going to be beneficial. However, we were spotted a little bit too broadside, and I'm not sure if we actually got citadeled in that situation. It looks to be that way with the 16,000 total damage. However, sometimes those hits can multiply. We got shot at by the enemy Kurfürst, so what are we going to do? We are going to return fire. Now, this was a little bit of a unique game in the fact that there were only 8 ships. This was not a cross playoff. I just think there were only 16 people playing Legendary tier at the time, and there were no destroyers. So, in taking this return fire, we're going to go ahead and wait for that Kurfürst to get behind the island. As you can see, a mass of their ships is grouped up behind that Bravo cap there. We get a pretty good chunky hit on his superstructure and casemate, 2 of the parts where the health was reduced on the Kurfürst. And for those that don't know, there are 2 overall parts to your health pool. The overall ship's HP and each compartment, for example, the bow, the stern, the superstructure, the casemate, and the citadel all have a total HP. Now, that's why you've seen in certain situations, especially with single-fire torpedoes, where you will, stack 8 or 9 torpedoes on the bow of a ship, and after about the 4th or 5th one, you almost stop getting damage. Well, that damage was to the bow of the ship. So just a little fun fact for you guys as we catch a Marco Polo broadside, and because he smoked and shot within his smoke firing penalty, he is detected and we are not. So while those rolling smoke screens can be very effective, make sure you are using them appropriately and not putting yourself in a bad situation. And speaking of ships in a bad situation, there is a Mino and a Salem right in front of us, and we are pushing around this corner very close. Our secondaries start to go off. We get a few hits there, which is nice. Secondaries are just one of those things where they have gotten much better, since their initial release, but sometimes you just have to get the right game to make them effective. Especially at Legendary tier, some of the gameplay is rather passive, so you do have to work yourself either into these positions or find a way to make your ship, useful without just YOLO rushing right up the middle. Now, I would like to note that we did spawn at the Bravo spawn, and instead of kind of YOLO rushing up the middle like we just talked about, we saw that a majority of our team was moving over from C, and I want to pause this statement because this is one of the most disappointing shots I have ever taken in any battleship. Now, I know what happened. The Salem started to turn in, and then he turned out, and all of our shells landed short. So we should have aimed that a little bit higher, but people ask sometimes why I aim so high, and it is situations like that. not only do shells land a touch short sometimes, especially on a ship that is turning away from you, if you aim high, those shells end up landing at the waterline. But we don't have time to think about that because a Prince Ruprecht is on his way. Now this shot, I'm going to be honest, I fire the first 2 turrets. Why? Because our angle is directly on his bow and we can overmatch his bow. However, those shells must have hit the side, but there is the other 2, the rear turrets, and just something for you guys to keep in mind, your front guns, especially on a ship like the Kurfürst, are nearly 800 meters apart. The Kurfürst is about 1,000 meters long, so the front guns are in a different position than the rear guns. So firing all of them at the same time in a situation like that would have been, you know, we probably would have gotten bounces on a majority of those shells as they hit the side. But we turn out of this Ruprecht here. However, there is a Mino in his smoke screen, but because we did not blind fire and we killed that Ruprecht, and there is no destroyers in this game, we are now concealed. Unfortunately, we're going to end up taking 2 torpedoes here. Doesn't matter though, because with the increased health of the Kurfürst, we are doing okay. That is when our cruiser, I think it was actually a Des Moines, which is why I called for intelligence data. I wanted him to radar that Mino in the smoke. We go ahead and take another salvo here as we turn a 1,000-meter ship and beach into this island here. So definitely, I think this game was at like 5 or 6 a.m., so maybe not the most awake I have ever been driving into islands. However, we've gotten 1 close quarters expert and a decent chunk of damage. On top of that, with a Mino turning broadside in front of a Des Moines, as our guns are loading, we are going to get this kill on him as well, and we actually finish it up with a secondary, so a beautiful little double kill there with the secondaries to start out this game. Now, returning to our point about YOLO rushing up the middle, as this Marco Polo kind of YOLO rushes up the middle here, certain maps like Two Brothers, Shards B spawn, there's a few others. When you spawn at B, you definitely should have an influence on that side or at that spawn. However, determining on game flow, as we mentioned, a majority of our ships abandoned C, you want to make a decision left or right in that set of circumstances. In this side, we decided to move over to Alpha, and as a result, we have killed a battleship, a cruiser, we pushed another cruiser and battleship away, and we now have the Alpha cap. So, as I said in that video, there is no one-size-fits-all approach, but the point I'm trying to make, and that everyone wants to, you know, the players who kind of care more about having fun in the first 30 seconds, the point we're trying to make is if you spawn at A, especially in a destroyer, try to play A as best you can. Don't immediately abandon that and sail all the way over to C or all the way to the back line to try and get torpedoes on targets behind enemy lines. Yes, that works against players who have no idea what they're doing, but when, you know, players, or especially when there's an aircraft carrier in the game, have any sort of intelligence, you are just basically predetermining your team to a loss. But speaking of losses, our team is not in cap control despite having the ship advantage, so what are we going to do in a secondary brawling battleship? Well, we're going to get involved. However, I do want to isolate this engagement, and I was thinking about trying to put my ship right between these rocks here, allowing our secondaries to get on target while also simultaneously possibly remaining concealed, as well as avoiding crossfires from the Charlie cap. When you give up map control such as our team has done, and a little bit of it is my fault in this situation, you have to avoid those crossfires. So that is what we're doing here, as well as drawing in closer to the enemy Kurfürst while also looking at taking shots on the enemy Salem. Especially in secondary battleships, if you can multitask, you will give your team and yourself a huge advantage, right? We can overmatch most of the bow and stern of the Salem. We are not running the 420s, rather than 406s. However, the 420s are a decent option. I just prefer the reload and the faster reload on the 406s, and here is a good example why. Get that leading shot, and it wouldn't have mattered if we were running 420s or 406s in that situation. He was broadside, and good night, thanks for playing. So that was our third kill, putting us at 105,000 damage. Now, speaking on that damage, if you take a look at our health, we've used, I think, 1 or 2 of our heals. We're around 60,000 health. We've used about half of our health. We've gotten 3 kills. We've dished out 105,000 damage. If I was being objective about my play right now, of course, me being me, I want 200,000 each game, 3K XP. However, a lot of players are looking for the home run hit every time instead of trying to get that single or double. If you just play your ship in a fashion in which it's meant to be played, if you're a battleship tanking damage, attracting damage, etc., then you will find yourself getting into these situations. So objectively speaking, already we have had ourselves a rather decent game. However, by the clickbait and the thumbnail, this game gets even better. I'm not going to lie, I was a little frustrated in this situation, and it's actually a decent play by the enemy GK as he is being pushed by a Musashi, as you can see. He is hiding behind this island, and well, I didn't want him to because I wanted my secondaries to go off, as well as for me to get another kill. As you can see, there are still 3 enemy ships remaining, and the potential for us to get 6 total kills out of 8 in this game. However, that GK is just now moving forward, relinquishing a bunch of his health to the Musashi behind him. While the GK was definitely buffed, if you sit there and, try to eat 460 millimeters worth of AP, you are still going to lose a lot of health. But he comes around this corner, we have our secondary booster on. We take a nice leading shot at his superstructure and casemate, and with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 penetrations there, or 6 pens and 1 overpen, we take off about 20k of his health with a few secondary hits, and we get our 4th kill of the match. In the meantime, we have worked our way back to the Bravo cap. We are now converting that to blue instead of red, and we have a beautiful broadside on this Vermont. The only question is, what is slower, a Vermont moving at top speed or the Kurfürst's turrets? So we're trying to move those turrets a little bit faster by turning left here. We actually get a concealed shot and one with decent dispersion. What is this hit going to be? 2 pens and 2 overpens, and that is what you're going to see quite often with the GK guns. The guns on the Kurfürst I feel like should, objectively be a lot better. However, they're not. You can get those salvos. The Vermont goes down, and this game is wrapping up. The Takahashi there is very low, so we're not going to get that much damage. However, we've gotten 2 close quarters experts, 2 assists in capture there, and as the thumbnail and clickbait advertise, we take a nice leading shot. I think we aim that shot at around 14 kilometers. And yes, a perfect little dispersion arc there to get the finishing touch and the Kraken. So again, bringing up my points earlier about why I aim high, those shells led directly into the center of his boat with some decent / lucky dispersion there. Only 140,000 damage, but 5 kills, and a Kraken is always fun. We were running Azure Lane Bismarck, first place placement with 2839 XP. We are going to definitely get a lot more games in the Kurfürst here. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, I am very busy with my job. I also own a personal training business. I say that and it's just a few people, but I just wanted to let you guys know that because I will definitely be slowing down a little bit on the Legends content, but like today, I actually had a nice little hour and a half to make this video, so it's going to seem a little bit rushed, but this is what we're running on the GK. Our build is soon to follow. I think that Wargaming is doing a much better job of trying to balance the game. However, I think it's going to be a long while before it's truly where we want it, if, it'll ever be where most of the player base wants it. I feel like some of the player base just complains no matter what, but a bunch of adult children, especially on the Facebook pages. But anywho, that is the video. That is the announcement. I love all you guys. I really appreciate the support. The comments on yesterday's video were they were good. I love you guys. You guys have a great day. Aaron out. Peace.